The reading from Emmett Fox is titled The Largesse of God. And in verse 19 of Psalm 18, the psalmist asserts, "He brought me forth also into a large place." Is it not a wonderful thought that God brings us forth into a large place? And then he adds that God delivered me because he delighted in me. This verse really means that being delivered from the dungeon of fear, the psalmist was beginning to experience the delight that peace of mind naturally brings. And now comes a very significant statement. According to the cleanness of my hands, hath he recompensed me. This refers to right conduct or right living. To have clean hands means trying to live the Christ life. Our prayers have but little power if we are not honestly trying to live up to the best that we know. We always do what we believe. With the merciful, thou wilt show thyself merciful. With an upright man, thou wilt show thyself upright. And with the pure, thou wilt show thyself pure. And with the forward, thou wilt show thyself forward. And those were from verses 25 to 26. This is a concise and powerful statement of the law that we literally reap what we sow. God, in his infinite wisdom, has made the laws of the universe and left them to work themselves out. He is not constantly interfering in every individual transaction. If this were the case, there would be no law and God would not be principled.
Well, today we're continuing a set of conversations on 21 ways to build a stronger spiritual life. Based on an article I came across by a fellow named Parachin. Last week we talked about number 8, share the journey. Number 9, serve. And number 10, cultivate a little solitude. We're going to move to 11 now, which is listed as fast and pray. And as I was reading this and considering, I realized that we probably have an inadequate understanding of fasting. When most people talk about fasting, they're talking about don't eat. Eating is regarded as a necessity of life. It's something that is part of our everyday rituals or processes, habits, if you will. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm sure in the habit of eating at least 3 times a day. But as I was thinking and waiting on inspiration, I realized that back then, fasting was one of the few, not eating was one of the few methods of simplifying your life, removing habit and distraction so that you had an emptiness and openness for new connections. I'm going to propose to you that in this day and age, fasting is more than just food. Now, I came across some interesting quotes about fasting, dealing with traditional fasting. One is, abstinence from food or drink is an element of private or public religious devotion. And it goes on to mention that fasting is not required in the Jewish Torah. This is something that was brought up in the Christian tradition. You could use, but they also say it can be used and misused. It can be used as a way of simplifying, of, they call it humiliating oneself, being humble before God. I'm not so sure that that fits. Well, it does if it's a God who's the all-powerful, who's going to strike you down otherwise. But the idea of self-abnegation, of doing without as part of a devotional, yeah, I can see that. And another writer said that fasting is designed to humble us and help us to draw closer to God. Now it goes on to say, and this is something I want to make sure everyone understands, fasting is not a form of penance or a way to attain favor with God through self-imposed suffering. In other words, there's enough too fine line to walk here, that what you are doing is something that is preparing you, is by giving up the habits, the distractions, some of the distractions of everyday life, giving you room, but it should not be done for show or in a transactional approach to God, because God is not transactional. Yeah, lots of people think so. If I do this, God, then you'll do this for me. That's transactional. That is not a spiritual walk any more than any transactional relationship here. You have probably seen situations where adult children are forever doing this for mom or dad in the hopes that maybe dad will finally love them. I am going to suggest that fasting in this day and age, we have a lot more latitude in terms of what we choose to fast with. You know, back in those days, basically you had food and you had sex, and that was about it. Well, consider whether your fasting might perhaps better involve something else that deprives us of everyday comfort and well-being. You can turn off your cell phones for a day, turn off your computers. You can separate yourself from human interactions for a period of time. In other words, for instance, go on a silent retreat where you're also giving up words, which is part of our comfort and part of the way that we can obscure our connections with the divine. What you're seeking, what you should be seeking with fasting is a clarity, an openness, if you will, an emptiness inside where there's room for the divine and you to establish new communications, new connections. That's what fasting really is about, is opening yourself, clearing out yourself. You know, in the Muslim tradition, during Ramadan, they fast from sunup to sundown with the goal of having it be a time when they can evaluate their spiritual walk in contact with Allah, the divine. Many faiths have different approaches to self-abnegation, to clearing out so you can clarify. Back in my college days, several of us Quakers became interested in the idea of fasting, and we embarked on one. You know, we limited ourselves to juice and to water. And I found in fairly short order, after the hunger pangs had gone, that I was able to focus to a pinpoint like I never had before. Well, yeah, I'll say it that way. And that I could stay focused for very long times. And the silence of worship each evening had some extra depth to it. Unfortunately for me, by the end of 36 hours or so, I was really shaky. I couldn't go any farther. And these days, if I do try fasting during the day for 12 hours, I get shaky at the end. But I relish time when I can have silence. During the day, I will often take a break, go upstairs, and live there in the silence for 10, 15, 20 minutes. You don't have to fast whatever kind of giving up you are doing for inordinate lengths. Just long enough so that your interior, your spiritual interior, feels freed to open to new inputs, new communications from the divine. And in this case, they're talking in terms of the building your stronger spiritual walk. You open yourself and you join yourself, the new open self, into prayer, into connection, into communication with the one great divine, whom we all seek to follow. You might try it some this week. See how you experience it, and consider what kind of fasting would be particularly challenging or particularly powerful for you. For some people, giving up eating is not that big a deal. But to give up their cell phones, but to turn the computer off, but to go on a retreat where there are no words used. I've had occasion to talk with a couple of people who went on silent retreats, and they told, each of them had what I would call a sort of earth-shaking experience, because they found themselves addressing pieces of themselves that they had been obscuring through busyness, through all the different aspects of not fasting, of living life. Irrespective of what kind of fasting you do, be open to the communication, to the guidance of the divine. Be open to a new sense of connection with the divine. And enter into that with your prayer time, allowing your prayers to connect in this new way. So that's number 11. Fast with your prayer. The 12th that is mentioned is turn your worries over to God. Well, we talk a lot about that. Emmett Fox talks a lot about it. Present it to God, then stop worrying about it because you've done what you can. I don't have a lot more to add there, except it takes practice and often a struggle, particularly when you're used to worrying, carrying your worries. I turn it over to God, but I keep taking it back. I've heard a few times. Robert Schuller talks about it in terms of stinking thinking. Sister Pepper talked about it as a habit of worrying that you had to break. I remember once, I don't remember what the issue was, but she said, you're in the habit of worrying about this. So starting tomorrow, she said, every time you find yourself worrying or thinking about this problem, crumple it up, toss it out the back of your head. She said the first day you're likely to have to do it 900,000 times. No, I think she said 9,000 times. But you just keep tossing it out the back of your head. Next day, it might only be 8,990 times. But if every day you make the habit of tossing that worry out the back of your head and telling it to go away, ultimately you'll get down to the point that you are no longer carrying that habit of worry about that particular issue. And then you are freed of it, which leads us back to Emmett Fox. God has a large room. Why fill it with worries? I'll say it again. God has a large room. Why fill it with worries? And if you got it loaded with worries right now, start taking action to get rid of those worries, to sweep them out. You can use processes like Sister Pepper described. If you know someone who does lift-on therapy, they can help you. There are other kinds of therapies and untherapies that can help you move away from stinking thinking. As the worries and the energy that goes into worries go away, there's that much more openness and energy for the higher for the higher vibrations of God's love and your walk in God, your spiritual walk. So think in terms of not only changing the habit of worry, but changing the pattern of worrying. Because it doesn't do much good if you finally get rid of this worry, if the next thing that comes along, you glom onto it as a worry and start worrying about it, as opposed to being able to let go of the worries you've been carrying, and any new potential worries come along, you don't even see them, or they bounce right off your protective spiritual being, if you will. The less you're worrying, the easier it is to be higher on the Hawkins scale, closer to achieving God's love and God's energy. And that's a good thing. That's number 12. Turn your worries over to God. Number 13 is spread love wherever you go. The writer talks about Mother Teresa, whose advice was, spread love everywhere you go, first of all in your own house. Let no one ever come to you without leaving better and happier. Be the living expression of God's kindness. Kindness in your face, kindness in your eyes, kindness in your smile, kindness in your warm greeting. I found myself thinking of the Muslim traditional greeting, Shalom Aleichem, peace be unto you, and the responses, and also unto you. We don't need those words to share with others our hope that they have peace, our desire that they have peace. And it doesn't have to be in necessarily overt actions to spread that peace, to spread that love. Your overt actions are wonderful. I've talked mentioned in numerous talks how my mother, even walking down the street, would give compliments to the people that she passed by, or say a cheery good morning. I give credit to Phyllis when we're sitting out on the porch. People walk down the sidewalk past us. She says hi or hello, and they look up and we smile and say hello back. Yeah, those are wonderful. It is spreading good cheer. It is spreading caring. But Norman Vincent Peale talks about situations where you might not be able to do that, and yet you are concerned or want more well-being for whomever. He talks about you send a lightning bolt prayer of love. Whoosh, and let it land on the person and bring them closer to divine love, more of an experience of divine love. And I want to make sure you understand that we're not talking necessarily world-changing or monumental or high visibility spreading love. Yeah, if you can do that, that's wonderful. Most of us probably won't ever have the opportunity to do it on a huge scale. But that doesn't mean you can't acknowledge the person at the checkout counter taking your money as a real person. It doesn't mean that you can't give good wishes to a child who's toddling down the street, to the mother as well. I read in one of the agony columns recently a retired gentleman who walks his dog about the time that school is getting in. And he writes in, I always make it a point to say good morning to any mothers I see with their kids and to the children. And if there's something I can say that's special to the child, like if one of them is carrying a musical instrument, a musician just like me, he says, he smiles at them. He was writing the agony column because he was concerned that maybe people would think he was a creep or a pedophile. And the response back was, more people need to be doing this. That by your acknowledgement of their existence in a pleasant way, you may be regarded as a safe place for someone to talk to or to come to when they're in trouble. That's one of the, if you will, the side effects of spreading love wherever you go. People can feel safe. People can feel loved. And too few people are getting the love and the recognition that they exist in enough quantity to feel whole. And by your simple acknowledgement of them, what's that Indian one? The spirit in me greets the spirit in you. I may have the wrong place or the wrong words, but it's something like that. You might consider that a mission, because as you reach out to other people, you're also creating a higher frequency for yourself by showing caring. And often enough, you'll get a response that can add to your joy for the day. A simple smile or a cheery good morning back as examples. Spreading love is and can be part of your tenfold return. Now, I'm not proposing that you make it transactional, but it doesn't hurt to be aware that, as Sister Pepper used to say, the tenfold return works for good or for ill. You may as well make it work for good. And in doing that, guess what? You're helping make the world a better place, and your walk in the world and in your connection with the divine, higher frequency, better for you, better for those around you, and better for the world. And let me go back to the idea of responding to the person across the counter from you. Another agony column commentary, someone wrote in, I forget the reason why, but they commented that they always tried to find something special to mention to somebody that they were engaged in retail transactions or some other kind of transaction with. And they discovered and realized that even though they thought it wasn't much, it meant so much to the people who were receiving it. They were called out of town unexpectedly for a week, two, I can't remember exactly. And when they came back and went to their normal grocery store, several of the employees came up to say, "We're so glad to see you. We were worried that something had happened to you." You know, all they'd done is acknowledge the existence in a positive way of the people who were there, the ones who helped them find something, the ones who cashiered them. It doesn't have to be difficult. Perhaps if you're not used to reaching out that way, you will feel awkward at first. But that can be part of your spiritual growth, to have the internal courage, the internal connection with the power of the divine, to feel good about saying, "I hope the rest of your day is easy." Or, "Boy, you certainly have cool taste. Look at those fingernails you got." Or whatever. You are touching people that way and lifting up the world. What better thing to do day by day, just as part of being a good, loving citizen of this God-built planet. So I think this is where we'll call it for the moment. So to review, the first one is fast and pray, but it doesn't have to be food. Next one today was turn your worries over to God. Change the pattern so you're no longer grabbing onto worries. And the third one is spread your love wherever you go, to whomever you encounter. And know by doing all this, you are building your spiritual walk too. We thank you, God, for having brought us together today, for having helped us to become wiser, for sharing our joy of living and joy of walking with you together. We thank you for the mutual support, for giving us new directions and a sense of path as we seek to serve you and become closer to you in our spiritual walk. We thank you for guiding us as we depart from here to the places which lift us up and help us lift the world. We thank you for bringing ever more good to us and to those we care about. And we thank you for supporting this place and this time when we can get together. For all this good, dear God, we say thank you, thank you, thank you, and amen.